So we're going to talk about motor controls, sensory controls, and various stuff about receptors, and then we'll adjourn. I'm going to start with motor controls, actually. It is a little repetitive, I know. Okay? So I'm going to just do the levels. So the highest level of motor control is called pre-command. Level, and that's cerebellum and basal nuclei. Remember we talked about their function. Do they directly control muscles? No, they don't. Okay, they just produce patterns. Am I clear? Good? Now, instructions that are formed in pre-command level then relate to projection level, which is basically your motor cortex. Okay? Now, motor cortex runs the instructions down via the segmental level, which may impart the spinal cord, the motor nerves. Okay, now, one important function of spinal cord that we're going to focus on, and you see it's really hard to talk about peripheral nervous system without involving CNS. Destiny, question?
No.
Okay, sorry, I mean,
No,
camera.
I was trying to look over.
Uh-huh.
Spelling.
Segmental, like segment. Go ahead.
BN stands for basal.
Basal nuclei, yeah. Okay, so formation, like instructions to motor cortex. Motor cortex forms actual impulses that go through the spinal cord to the muscles. So the levels that have access to the muscles are projection and segmental. Important terms associated with the segmental level. Central pattern generator. So your spinal cord contains central pattern generators, which are responsible for repetitive movements. Walking, running, that kind of stuff. Does that make sense? This is why, like, imagine hypothetically have a person who is walking and somehow you manage to, in a split second, cut the head off. The person will still be walking for some time because we don't need brains to walk. That makes sense? That's it for motor. We're going to go back to some motor controls when we talk about reflexes, but it's going to be next week. Let's do sensory actually. So okay. So in this case, I'm going to go from the bottom to the top because this is how signal goes. Are you with me? So first cons, we're going to spend quite some time on the receptor level, which, very unsurprisingly, consists of receptors. Okay? You're following me so far, right? Now, receptor, generally speaking, receives the stimulus. And then stimulus generates the response, and response goes through the neurons. That makes sense? So basically, stimulus generates a potential. To make it safe, we're going to call it graded potential. But if it's converted, if it goes above threshold, it becomes action potential, as we discussed before. So there are two types of potentials that can be generated on the receptor. First type is called a generator potential. So what is that? Look, you have a neuron. Okay? You have a stimulus. And when stimulus acts, pay attention, directly on the neuron, that generates the potential. Does that make sense? The alternative to this is when stimulus acts on some kind of a cell that releases neurotransmitter, which in turn acts on the neuron, so that's neurotransmitter, generating a potential. And this one is called receptor potential. So you see there are two ways to skin the cat. Okay, so in one case, and I'm going to leave this drawings here, because when we talk about receptors, you will see an illustration of this. We good so far? So again, in one case, stimulus acts directly on the neuron, generating the potential, and this is called generator potential. In another case, stimulus acts on the receptor cell, which releases neurotransmitter, and this is receptor potential. Okay? Now, when we're going to talk about receptors a little bit more kind of generalized things. Receptors, you have action potential going, okay? So you go from receptor level to the circuit level. Neuronal pathways, tracts, so sensory tracts in the spine. And from the circuit level, the signal reaches your perceptual level. And this is your somatosensory cortex. Okay? I know that what we're talking about is kind of on the boring side. It's a lot of question, Rhonda?
No, what is the second one, the circuit sensory?
Tracts. Tracts or pathways. The stuff that we talked about kind of in the first half of the class. Okay? Okay, we've got this. Okay. Does that make sense? Don't look for some really deeper meaning behind it. Okay? So what I'm going to lay out here now is a short conversation about receptors. You can classify them in multiple ways. So first of all, you can classify them by location. Receptors can be interoceptors versus exteroceptors. Does the difference make sense? Let me highlight clearly that we're talking about receptors. Intra versus extra. Interoceptors inside, like in your stomach. Extraceptors are outside in your skin. Good? Super straightforward. Okay? They can be classified by the type of signal, by the type of stimulus, sorry, that they respond to. So you can have mechanoreceptors, thermoreceptors, chemoreceptors. Okay, so vibration, temperature, chemicals. Good. And probably the really important type of receptors that we need to appreciate by the type of signal, nociceptors. Very specifically, these are the ones that do pain. Okay? Now, same receptor can fall into multiple categories. You do have receptors in the skin, right? External. Can you feel touch? You've got some mechanoreceptors. Can certain types of touch cause pain? Some of those mechanoreceptors, exteromechanoreceptors, are nociceptors. Makes sense, right? I'm going to leave it here because the last thing that we're going to do today, we're going to break receptors down into major categories, okay? They're going to be two, and they are stupidly simple. Basically, structurally, receptors can be non-encapsulated, meaning that they are cells that are not surrounded by the connective tissue capsule, and they can be encapsulated. So non-encapsulated receptors. Free nerve endings. Now look, all the images will become extremely handy right now. Check this out. Free nerve endings can be all of it. They can sense everything. They can be everywhere. You see what I'm saying? And look, we're talking about generator potential here. That's like naked neurons right there. We good? Hair follicle receptors. Basically neurons that specifically innervate your hair follicles. What kind of receptor is that? Is it mechanotherm or chemo? When you move your hair, what kind of receptor? It's mechanoreceptors. And then you have Merkel discs, which are a part of the Merkel cell. Okay, another mechanoreceptor, non-encapsulated. Does it make sense? And what about encapsulated receptors? So I'm going to lay out some pretty interesting concept here. I'm going to write them down, and then we're going to chat about them. Okay? So you have three mechanoreceptors, Masonic corpuscles, lamellar or Pacinian corpuscles, and bulbous corpuscles or affinis endings. All of them are mechanoreceptors. Ooh, oh crap. Okay. All of them are mechanoreceptors. You with me? Let's talk about location. So both Meissner and lamellar corpuscles are located in very, very sensitive parts of your skin, like genitalia, nipples, hands, face. Does that make sense? Really, really sensitive. But Meissner corpuscle is located in the superficial skin. Are you following me? Very close to the surface. And it senses light touch. Are you following? Because light touch doesn't penetrate all the way here. Because lamellar corpuscles are located in the deep dermis, deep in the skin. Are you following? Right? So it will sense strong touch or intense vibration. We good? And now you understand the logic of this. Bulbous corpuscles are located in a subcutaneous tissue really deep. If they sense something, that's got to be bad. Like if the touch is so strong that it gets all the way down there to the subcutaneous tissue and triggers signaling from bulbous corpuscles, that's got to be painful. You see what I'm saying? They also are located in the capsules of your joints. So normal movements will not trigger them. But if somebody tries to dislocate your joint, it stretches the capsule. Are you following? And it triggers them, so they produce pain. They are, in addition to all of it, nociceptors. You good? 3 more. We're going to talk about a couple of them. Muscle spindle, tendon organ, and joint kinesthetic receptors. Now look, here's the thing. And I'm going to tell this, but we're going to talk about it next time. So muscle spindle detects the stretch of the muscle. Tendon organ detects the tension in the muscle. Joint kinesthetic receptors detect the position of the joint. All of them are classic mechanoreceptors. Like you have all mechanoreceptors here. Does that make sense? Last 2 sort of disjointed concepts. Phasic receptors versus tonic. So basically, here's the thing. You are sitting, and I use this example all the time. Well, okay, better. Are you getting used to masks? Yes. At some point you just stop noticing, right? What happens? Especially like when I talk, it's constantly moving, so this is why I'm not getting used. But if you like just wear it and it's not moving, very soon you kind of forget about it. Mask triggers Merkel discs, hair follicle receptors for nerve endings in your skin and Meissner corpuscles. That makes sense. But that sensation, that pressure, is it's the same all the time. Doesn't change. So these receptors adapt and kind of set the new baseline. Are you following me? Receptors that adapt and adapt fast are called phasic. Phasic are adapting. Let me put this in writing somewhere here. Tonic are non-adapting or slowly adapting. So nociceptors, as a general rule, receptors that sense pain, are they adapting or non-adapting? Non-adapting. You should not. There is a Greek saying, what is pain? Pain is a guard dog of your body. Pain tells you something's wrong. That makes sense? So nociceptors are slowly adapting, non-adapting. For instance, here, these two are pretty fast adapting. Bulbous corpuscles? No. Does it make sense? And this whole idea, this whole conversation illustrates many interesting concepts about receptors. For instance, receptor will transmit the signal only if the receptor specificity matches the signal. You can't trigger the response from Meissner by temperature. It's not a thermoreceptor, okay? Now, Meissner corpuscle is for light touch. So, strong touch, so strong, Meissner corpuscle will not sense the strong touch. It will not send the signals. Does it make sense? Last little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about pain next time, very short. But now, sounds terrifying. But, like, it's fun to bring certain things, like, explain, like, oh yeah, now I realize why that happens. Are you familiar with that hot and icy Bengay creams? Muscle rub, treat joint pain, muscle pain. Well, they don't treat it. What they do? They stimulate. So your receptors that sense pain, burning sensation, that's your muscle rub, and itching are basically the same. So when you apply those capsaicin creams or hot and icy, whatever, they send such a massive signal through those chemoreceptors that it basically takes over the pathways, and pain signaling just can't go. It still hurts. I mean, it's still damaged, don't get me wrong. It's like, somebody, what's that, like, somebody shouts louder than everybody else's, and that's the only thing that you can hear. That's the only thing that your nervous system is hearing, is the sensation of burning from those creams. They don't really treat anything. Does that make sense? Good? It's good. We're done for today. I'm trying to pace 2 classes the same.